Thanks for joining me again. Here we have part 2 of our processing of the Iris Nebula NGC 7023. So in the last video I showed you how to go through Astro Pixel Processor to get this composite, this stacked image that we have here. Now I'm going to show you how I finish it off in Photoshop. So let's open up the picture. So this is the TIFF file in our processing directory for APP. So I'm going to right click on it and open with Photoshop. And it's going to take just a second. You can't see it, but on the other screen here I've got the Photoshop logo coming together. So, and now it is open in Photoshop. So the first thing I usually like to do is I'll get it orientated right and cropped. So I'll select all with a Control A, and then the transform tool with Control T, and try to get this kind of leveled off here, so I can save as much of the image as possible. Then I'll deselect everything and get my selection tool and try to get as close as I can to the borders. I'm going to crop that. Now we have the image. We're going to try and do some editing to here. I have several tools that I end up using throughout the course of this editing. So we've got some actions, astronomy tools, version 1.62, and Annie's Astro actions that we use. I also have the Nick collection installed. I don't usually use these on Astro photos. Occasionally I would use Define 2, which is a noise reduction tool, but since then I've picked up the Topaz Labs denoise and sharpen tools, and I tend to use the denoise tool now more than I do the Define tool in the Nick collection. So we'll go ahead and do some basic editing here now. Looking at this, we've got this dust. If you've seen a good picture of the Iris Nebula, you see a really dusty region of space. I've never been really good at pulling that out. A lot of people are much better at it than I am. And it could be the data I collect, it could be my gear, it could be my processing, it could be multiple things, but we're going to try and give it a shot here. So if we click on Image, Adjustment, and then Levels, we can push these levels around to try and bring out some more of that dust. You can get to this in a couple different places. Here in the Levels tool, you can do some of it inside of Camera Raw, which is something else I use quite a bit. So filters and then Camera Raw. But this is more of a a curve tool, and you can switch it over to another type of tool here. So we can do that there. I usually use the points if I am doing it. So you can stretch it some more doing this, and try to pull out some more of that dust. So now whenever you do this though, you're going to create noise. You can see it's pretty noisy. So let's go ahead and leave that. And we'll go ahead and do some basic editing real quick and then see if we can clean it up some more. So my clarity tool, I usually use it. You can see it's adjusting some of the highlights and the contrast just a little bit. But then I take my texture and bring it down because the stars look really harsh. So I'll bring the texture down to soften up the stars, make them not so harsh. And then also the highlights, you can bring those down to soften the stars just a little bit as well. So contrast, the more contrast you add, the noisier the image is going to get. The dehaze tool, I do use it periodically too, and you can very easily get the background too dark doing any one of these things. So I kind of like the way that looks. Also in Camera Raw you have sharpening and noise reduction. So you can see our noise. You know, if we dialed that up pretty high, it's going to soften it. But we also lose details when we do that. And so then you can try and compensate with the sharpening, but then it ends up, you know, compressing the image and making it look not too good. So, and really, even with that noise reduction, it's not terrible. You know, I'm not the best at this hobby. I have fun with it, but you know, I don't have any astrophotography photos of the day or anything like that. So, but I do have a good time. So you can adjust your white balance here. I usually try to keep the space, the blackness of space, a sort of dark grayish color. For me, that's what I prefer. But you can get, you know, pretty carried away with it if you're not careful. So I don't do anything with the saturation at this point. I end up opening up this camera raw filter several times throughout the processing to get the image that I want. So let's start with this. Hit OK and let that fill in. So you know, made a bit of a difference. Still got some bad corners and some edges, and we can crop that out a little later if we need to. So now inside of our actions here, we can there's a lot of things that we can use. Not all of them are for every picture. You can do the noise reduction, but I don't use it because I use the Topaz Labs. We can reduce the stars, you can remove the stars entirely, but there's actually a better program for that if you want to do that. It's called StarNet, and it is for download. So you can combine some of the colors in here, your narrowband images, enhance, you know, certain parts of the image and bring the stars down. I do use the increased star color fairly often. It seems to help with, you know, the star field itself just a little bit. So it is nice to have a good colorful star field in some of these images. So the light pollution removal tools, I don't usually use it. There is one I do typically use. The gradient reduction in Annie's Astro Actions tends to work pretty good. So you know, it takes care of some of the stuff in the corners and if there's an uneven field across. So I do use that sometimes. And actually the reduced vignetting action worked pretty well earlier when I used it also. So, you know, basically every image I do is just a little bit different, but I still have a few dozen tools that I use most of the time. So, but you can play around with these and get it to the way you want it. So I'm going to go back to this now. You know, I made an adjustment in camera raw. I've got a decent looking image from best I can tell. So I might go ahead and open up the Topaz Labs, denoise, and apply a light noise reduction to it before I make more adjustments. Now sometimes I make adjustments or do the noise reduction before I do anything. Sometimes I do a few steps into the editing and then do the noise reduction, and sometimes I just do it at the end, and sometimes I try it at every step, just looking for the best results. So you can see it clears it up really nicely, you know, and I can even back that down just a little bit, and it's going to, you know, take away some of that distortion with the details. But you can also dial up that sharpness, and it will clean it up quite a bit. Really good program. Does great for, you know, the astrophotography photos, but even just regular photos, I use it, you know, quite a bit, to be honest with you. So we'll go ahead and hit that and let it run through this and apply that noise reduction filter to this whole image. So now we've got what looks like a pretty clean image. This is, you know, 10 hours worth of images, so you know, it looks, you know, pretty decent. The stars are crisp. I still don't have a lot of dust, which, you know, like I said, I've never been terribly good at getting that, so try to bring it out just a little bit more though. now that I've applied that noise reduction filter, it's not going to look quite as bad once I start doing that. So, and I'd probably still want to crop it down just a little bit to get rid of some of these. I've got a border here from where it dithered, and my edges, I'm going to have to redo my flats on this to really make it like I need to. So I'll save that. I'll go ahead and crop out some of this. Kind of bothering me. So, and now I'm going to open it up in Camera Raw one more time and play around with some of these options. Bring that texture down a little bit. We'll bring up that clarity some still. And again, like I said, this is all to taste. I have a tendency to mess around with these images a lot, just trying to get a feel for it the way I think it should look. It's not always the case. Now, whenever I get close to being done, I'll go ahead and start applying the saturation and vibrance to try and bring out some of the colors. You can see it's starting to make our stars look a little crazy, so we'll back that back off just a little bit. Make some adjustments there. And the core of the nebula there is still pretty blown out, so try and bring the highlights down just a little bit to make it to where it's not quite so bad. So we'll hit apply on that, and I'll go ahead and throw one of these actions in here and see if it makes a difference. Let's see. If I can find the one I'm looking for. Alright, so what I ended up running was the Enhance DSO and Reduce Stars feature. Whenever you run one of these actions, sometimes it will merge the two layers, and if it does that, just hit Undo. So Edit, and you can undo, or Control Z, and it should separate the layers for you, and then you can toggle it to see the difference between the two images. So, it seems like it brightened the image up, and I don't really much care for that. I think I prefer the second one, so I'll just go ahead and delete that. So one other thing I was going to show you is under Image Adjustments, you can go to Selective Color, and you can look at each of these colors to see how it's affecting the image. So if we were to look at reds, usually the first thing I do is I'll take this black slider just to see how much red is actually in here, or how much of this color is actually in there. So you can see it's making a bit of a difference as I adjust it. So we could looks like the dust cloud around it is maybe a little red. So if we wanted to maybe add some, or bring the magenta out a little bit, or dial it back, we can change some of the colors of some of this to look how we want it to. So you can take and adjust this. Now, one thing I do use this for quite a bit is my black point on the image, and then also like the neutral, so I can dial down how bright that background is, or the space. If I come up to the neutrals, I can kind of do the same thing, and just get, again, something that you're pleased with to look at. You can get rid of some of that bright white by pulling it back just a little bit in here too. But that's kind of the extent of it. It's probably my best Iris Nebula that I have. See if I can clean it up a little bit more with better flats, and try to maybe merge my data from last year on it to get some more time, maybe bring out some more of that dust. Clear skies to everybody. Have a great time. See you later.